I had been learning about tarot for the past 8 or 9 years. So today I figured that I would explain to you most useful practical life advice that I have learned by studying tarot. These are pieces of advice that I think anyone would benefit from listening to. So let's start. All right, so the first thing that you need to know is most people see or think of tarot as just a divinatory tool, like we were talking about an oracle or runes or something like that. But in reality, this particular tarot deck, at least, this is Rider White, the intention was to encode within these cards all the esoteric knowledge that explains reality, God, and the creation of this world. And so each of the cards in tarot is a card, not this one, it's a card, but it's also a page. So tarot really is like a book without a spine. Each card is a page full of information, and you can read them like you would read a book if you understand the symbols that are depicted in these cards and the correlations. So you can use tarot to read the future, but you can also use it to learn about the metaphysical reality around you. And you can also use it as sort of like a self-improvement guide. There's a lot of very good practical advice encoded in these cards. And that's the angle that I want to share with you. Let me know in the comments if you would also like me to explain the esoteric layer, like the deepest layer of these cards. All right, this is the first card in the tarot deck, and it's called the Fool. But if we pay attention to the card and we look closely, you will realize that even though this is the first card, it is not number 1, it's actually number 0, because the Fool, it's outside the numbering system in tarot. This is the first and the last card, the Alpha and the Omega. And what do we see on this card? We see a fool on a hill, like the Beatles song. He's wearing very flamboyant clothing, and even though he's right there at the precipice, he's not looking down. He's looking up at the sky, and we fear that he's going to trip and fall. It's a very risky thing that he's doing. And what does the Fool tell us? What kind of advice is the Fool giving us? Well, whenever you start something, you're not a master. You're actually a fool at it. You don't know what you're doing. You're very nervous. And there is a big risk of failing. But the only way that you can start a new project is by going into it a little bit blind. Because if you stare right into the abyss, if this man looks down, he will not be able to walk around those cliffs. It's just gonna go back from where he came from. And so everything worthwhile in life, you will always begin as a fool. And it is only the person who's capable of embracing that, the one who can move on from being a fool into being a master. You need to be willing to be a little bit of a fool, and you need to be willing to take big risks. And this, of course, you can see in a very practical way in your life or the lives of others. Whenever somebody wants to do something new, somebody wants to do a new project, take a new direction in life, many people around them are going to try and discourage them. Oh, no, don't be a fool, it's too risky. You don't know what you're doing, better stick to what you know. And the Fool is asking you to find the courage within yourself to be a little bit stupid, to take those risks that you need to take, even if they feel unsurmountable. The next card we have here is called the Magician. And even though this is the second card, the number is number 1. And some people say that the Fool grows into the magician, because the magician is a master of his craft. And we know he is a master of his craft because right there on the table, he has the 4 suits of the tarot. He has the cups, he has the wands, he has the swords, and he has the pentacles. And this card is inviting you to make use of every tool in your arsenal. In order to become a master, you're going to need to look at things from multiple perspectives. The cup symbolizes emotion or feelings. The sword symbolizes the intellect. The wand symbolizes will. And the pentacle symbolizes sensible reality. So, whenever you want to do something masterfully, you need to take into account exactly those things. The resources that you dispose of, the practical realities of your day-to-day life, your willingness to go through with this, your intention, your feelings, and your logic, your reason. They all need to be on the table. You need to work with all of them at once for something to work really well for you. The next card is called the High Priestess. And what we see here is a woman in robes sitting in front of a veil with 2 columns, a black column and a white column. And her dress is transforming into water. And on her lap, she has a book, a scroll. Sometimes it's a scroll, sometimes it's a book. In this deck, it is a scroll. And what does she represent? And what is the advice that this card can give you? She represents the unconscious mind. She's the part of your mind that hides things from you. And this part of you includes all of your true desires, your fears, your dreams, all of the things that you have repressed. And the scroll that this high priestess is holding on her lap is wisdom. It's the entirety of your memories and also the memories of mankind, because consciousness is shared. So, what is the practical life advice the High Priestess gives you is you already have all the knowledge that you need inside of you, in your unconscious. Many times when we have a problem and we have a question, we look outside for the answers. We look for somebody to help us navigate what we're feeling. We look for knowledge in books. We look for other people's opinions of our situation. But the High Priestess is telling you that you have everything you need inside of yourself. And sometimes what you truly need is to consult with a part of you that is not so easy to see. So no need to look for external validation. Sometimes the most valuable information is inside of you. Now we have the Priestess. The Priestess represents the feminine fertile principle. She's the principle of abundance, luxury, fertility. And as you can see here, this is often interpreted as a pregnant woman. And as you can see, she's sitting very comfortably in some lush cushions in a beautiful meadow. And this card, the life advice that it gives you is femininity, abundance, fertility. All of them require comfort. It is very difficult to be able to give, to produce things when you are living in scarcity. So if you're having a hard time, if you're going through hardship, abundance is not going to necessarily spring from that. Softness, fertility, and abundance need to be sheltered. They can only flow from a place of comfort, of softness, of gentleness. And what is the life, like the practical life advice in a very practical way that you can see is, if you want to have abundance in your life, it is very important to keep that in mind. Nothing abundant will come from you. No fertility will come from you if you're living in a situation of starkness. You need to invest in your own comfort and in your own peace of mind and in your own some level of luxury in order to be able to put forth the best out of you. The next card is the Emperor, and this represents the masculine energy at its best. And as you can see, this is the counterpart to the Empress. It is a king sitting on a very solid throne. And what this card teaches you is structure and containment as a building block of life. You not only need to have abundance and comfort for fertility to rise, it also needs to have containment and direction. And I'm going to give you the example of nature, right? If you have abundance and fertility with no limit, with no structure, what you get is a very scary jungle. You know, one thing eats another and it stops being this peaceful meadow. In order for nature to become a garden, you need somebody to come in and fence it and prune it and provide some sense of structure. And in your daily life, what does this mean? Well, it means everything in your life needs to have the proper structure, the proper containment. For example, if you're someone who really likes cars and you have a car that you like very much, if you do not pay attention to your car, eventually it will no longer be as beautiful, as comfortable, and as functional as it is right now. What the car requires is for you to take care of it. How? Well, by paying attention to the car, by polishing the car, by changing its oil when it has to be changed, by changing a piece if it starts malfunctioning. All of these things are what keeps the car running and functional. The next card we have here is the Hierophant. And the Hierophant has a very interesting lesson to teach us. You see, this guy is kind of like a pope. It's a religious authority figure. See, he has some liturgic robe and headdress, and he's holding something very similar to a cross. And before him, if you pay attention, you can see there are two men. Two men are coming before him, before the Hierophant. And these two men are seeking his counsel. See, there's a dispute. And if you can see that, they're wearing different clothing. One of them is wearing robes with roses on them, and the other one is wearing robes with lilies on them. And these two guys, they represent parts of your own self. One part represents reason, and the other part represents emotion or feeling or intuition. And they're not always agreeing on everything, you see. So there are moments in your life where you will have a war raging within yourself between one side of you wants one thing and the other side of you wants another thing. And the advice the Hierophant gives you is that you are always ultimately the one in charge. It is your consciousness, the one that has to listen to both sides and find the common ground, find an agreement, so both sides of you can finally be in harmony. But it's very important to listen to them first, to allow them to approach and listen to them. So often we identify with either side and forget that the other side exists. And that's what the Hierophant invites you to do, to listen to both sides of you. Here we have the Lovers. And you may see this card and think of, well, Adam and Eve, of course. Yeah, Adam and Eve and the Archangel Michael up here. And you may think that this card is about love. It's about actual lovers in a literal way. But in reality, this card is about difficult decisions. When you're being tempted to do something that is not in your best interest, just like Adam and Eve were tempted to eat the fruit of the forbidden tree. So this card is like a fork in the road, and it's asking you, which side are you going to go down on this path that you're in? And it invites you to consider the long-term ramification of your decisions. Sometimes something that looks very appetizing, very lush, delicious, in the short term is going to have bad repercussions on the long term. So this is a card that invites you to stop and think about the ramifications of your decisions. Not just take one side or the other without thinking, but to pause and think before you're tempted to go down a path that is not the best for you. The next card is the Chariot. And here we see a man. He's dressed for war and he's riding a chariot. But if you look closely, there are a few things out of place here. One of them is the fact that this chariot is not being pulled by horses. It's being pulled by sphinxes. And these sphinxes do not seem to be moving anywhere. They're quite static, like sphinxes are, right? Sphinxes are famous for being made out of rock. They don't really move anywhere. They just ask you questions that make you puzzle your mind, you know? So what does this card mean? What is the meaning behind this card? Well, the meaning behind this card is that sometimes you have all the will in the world to make something happen, but the forces that are pulling you are not doing their part. So you're not finding it easy to move anywhere. Even you came dressed in your armor. You're ready to fight. You're in the car, just ready to move forward, but the horses that were supposed to pull you forward are not there. You see? And this card invites you to persist in your intention, even if things don't align for you perfectly well. Because eventually, down the line, you will find the answer that you need and you will be able to move forward. But if you get discouraged at the first obstacle, then you're never going to get to where you're going. So the advice is, whenever you're going to do something and you're ready and you have all of your will put into this project, sometimes things just don't align for you. But this doesn't mean that it is not possible. It only means that the work ahead is going to be harder. But if you persist and if you hold on to your intentions, eventually things will unblock when you find the answer. The next card is Strength. And here we see a very ferocious lion and a virgin dressed in white who is very gently opening the mouth of the lion. The lion here represents your passions, your instincts, that beastly part of you that has desires and impulses that don't necessarily align with what you want for yourself. And so many times we're tempted to fight this beast with all of our strength, with all of our force, by being, violent. We're persuaded of treating this side of our own selves like Hercules, fighting the lion with your bare hands and killing it and strangling it. But strength is telling us that not all strength is not necessarily physical or violent. strength can also be gentle and kind. And when it comes to your own self, your own passions, your own, the beast within you, it is much better to try and control it through gentleness, through care, through pureness of intention, like the Virgin. Ultimately, if you strangle the lion, it is a part of you strangling the other. And here we have the hermit. And the hermit is holding a lamp with a star inside of it. With this lamp, he could light up the road ahead. But if you take a close look, you will see that there is no road ahead. He's standing alone on top of a cliff, and there is nowhere for him to go, because the path that the hermit is illuminating is a path inwards. The hermit is telling you that sometimes when you don't have clarity, when you cannot see the path ahead of you, the only thing that you can actually do is find solitude and seek answers inside of yourself. Sometimes we think that we need to go places, do things in the external world. But many times, what we're looking for is not outside, but within. The hermit is inviting you to take that trip inside of you. Now we're going to get to the part where tarot becomes a little bit darker, and it'll give you advice related to difficult events in your life. And the first such cards is the Wheel of Fortune. This is in my opinion, this is a very important card. This card shows you, this is a wheel, and we have different creatures on the wheel. We have a sphinx, and we have this devil right here. And I'm not going to go into all the esoteric meaning of the card, the correlations, but what I will say is that this card shows you that nobody is on top of the wheel all the time. And nobody is at the bottom of the wheel all of their life. The wheel of life turns and turns, and sometimes you will find yourself at the cusp of it. Everything going your way, you're making strides, fortune smiles at you. But just when you think that your whole life is going to be peachy, something will happen that will make the wheel turn, and you're going to find yourself in the pits again. And things will not be as easy, comfortable, or good. Now you're going to have to face some ordeals. Some heavy things are going to be thrown your way. And you're going to be sad, and it's going to be hard. And you're going to think that it's never going to end. And you're going to be feeling very sorry for yourself. And just when you think that you cannot take it anymore, the wheel will turn again, and you will be back on top. Because life is not linear. Life is ups and downs. And it is very important to remember this when you're going through either side, like either pole of the wheel. When you're having a really good time, remember, this is you being fortunate, and it's not going to last forever. And when you're down in the pits, it's very useful to remember this too shall pass. It's not going to be forever. The very nature of life is a wheel, a spinning wheel. And before you know it, you will be back up again. Nothing is permanent in life. The only permanent thing is change. Now we have justice. And here we have justice. And this represents the world of contracts, law, dealings with the government or other people. And I'm not sure if it's very visible in this particular deck, but in most decks, I think in this one too, most decks, justice is not symmetrical. There is always something different from one side to the other. For example, on this side, you can see her foot, but on this side, it is hidden. The hair on this side is slightly different from the hair on that side. And in some decks, the cape that she's wearing has a little rope around it. Because in tarot, justice is everything but fair. And it's everything but blind. Because the justice of man can be manipulated and can be wielded as a weapon and can be used against you. And so when dealing with the justice of man, you have to always be very careful, because morality, divine justice, and the justice system are very different things. Lady Justice, more often than not, has her hands tied by the powerful. So the advice here is, don't go trusting the law blindly. Don't go trusting, be very careful when signing contracts, when getting into dealings with other people, because justice is everything but blind and everything but fair. Here's the hangman. Here's the hangman. He's hanging by his foot. There's a rope tied to his ankle. He's hanging upside down. It looks like this would be very uncomfortable to sustain. But if you see his face, he's not suffering. He's actually, there's light radiating from his face. And he has a serene expression. So what is this card about? Well, this card is about many things, but from a practical advice sort of perspective, sometimes what you really need in life is a new perspective. Sometimes you have seen your life and the things that you're working on so much that you no longer see them accurately. You know, you lose all perspective of what you're working on just because you've been seeing it so much. So what the hangman wants you to do is to completely alter your perspective, to see things from a new light. This is particularly useful, and I'm going to give you many practical situations where this is useful. So from the most practical, mundane one, if you, for example, paint, and you've been painting a picture for a long time, sometimes you lose perspective, and a very good exercise to do is turn your painting upside down, and suddenly you're going to start seeing all the little details that your brain had glossed over from seeing it so much. But also, in any situation, it is always a great exercise to try to put yourself in the opposite perspective from where you're sitting. Now comes death, and people are very afraid of this card. Obviously, most people are afraid of death. And we have a skeleton in an armor riding a white horse with a dark flag. And all kinds of people are kneeling before death. We see beggars and kings. We see children and adults. Everybody kneels and succumbs in front of death. But if you look closely, the sun is rising in the horizon. And in some decks, you can see little sprouts, little seedlings sprouting on the ground. Because death, or closure, because this is not just like physical death, but like the ending of a chapter, like closing a chapter in your life, closing a door. Death is not really the end, but it's transformation. Sometimes things need to die and wash away so that new and better things can be born in its place. And in your personal life, you can see that sometimes we get blinded by sadness when something ends, and we don't realize that by ending something, we are at the same time opening the opportunity for a new thing, a better thing, something better to take its place. The forests burn periodically so that new plants can grow, and all the dry leaves from the trees fall into the ground and accumulate to facilitate that process. Because by burning all of the useless, dry, and half-dead plants, there is space for new growth. So that is what death tells you. It tells you, don't be afraid of closing a chapter. It is just a transition, and something will take its place. A new door will open. And sometimes we need to terminate things in order to make space for new things in your life. The next card is called Temperance. And it has a beautiful angel with 2 cups in his hands, and he is pouring the content of 1 cup into the other. And he has 1 foot on the ground and 1 foot in the water. And what this card represents is transformation through merger, through blending things. You see? The world is a process of transformation. We're constantly changing from one state into the other, and every time we change, we have to say goodbye to the person that we were before, so that we can say hello to the person that we're becoming. So it's a process of molting, where you're leaving behind your old self and welcoming a new self. And that process never ends, because we're never full, we're never whole. There's always somewhere else to transform into. But what Temperance is telling you here is there are many ways to go about this process. You can go from one pole into the other. You can go from being a coward into being super brave. You can go from being poor to being rich. But what Temperance is telling you here is sometimes the best course of action is the golden mean. The best course of action is not to transform completely from one pole to the other, but to achieve the equilibrium, to have 1 foot on land and 1 foot in water, or to pour both the content of both cups into one another. So that way, you're blending the 2 principles and you're reaching the golden mean, rather than moving like a ping pong from one end to the other. And this is, I don't know if you've heard this, but this is I think it's Aristotelian, the notion that the virtue is in between 2 vices, like being temerity and cowardice are both extremes, and then being valiant is right in the middle. Now we have the devil. This is another card that people fear very much, but I'm going to explain to you what it means, and then it'll not look so scary anymore. So the devil is it's kind of like a caricature of a devil. It's red with horns and, like a pentacle, inverted pentacle on his head, and he's looking straight at you with a very angry face. And the devil there's 2 figures under the devil, a man and a woman. The man and the woman we have been seeing through the entire tarot. And they have a chain around their necks. They're tied. And I want you to notice something very interesting here. And it's the fact that these guys, this card and this card, are essentially the same card. I don't know if you can see it, but, the couple, Adam and Eve, are present in both cards, and over them there's an angel and there's a devil. In one there's an angel, and in one there's a devil. And it is no coincidence, because this card is about temptation. It's about finding yourself in a fork on the path and facing a difficult choice and making sure that you choose right? This is this card. This card is what happens if you choose wrong. If you choose wrong and you choose temptation, then what happens is that you are going to be trapped. You're going to be trapped by your own lower passions. That which you choose because it was more, because it looked delicious, it was more comfortable or easier or attractive, and instead of making the difficult choice that would make sure that you had a good outcome in the long term, that is the devil. But here's the piece of advice within this card. If you take a look at these 2, they have chains around their necks, but they're not really tight. It kind of feels like if they just wanted to take these off, they could, So their own entrapment here is voluntary. It is voluntary. Whatever vice, whatever bad situation you have brought upon yourself from a lack of measure, imagine that you have an addiction, imagine that you have debt, imagine that you have any of these problems. Maybe you like to drink too much, maybe you like to gamble, maybe you have, all of these things have an origin inside of you. So you have the power to take off the shackles. It is all within your power. The next card is the Tower. And the Tower is a very ominous card. People hate to see this card when it pops up. And yeah, it looks pretty scary. You see there's a tower, there's a lightning bolt, fire, people jumping out of the tower. Ah! Yeah, very scary stuff. But this card has a really good piece of advice for you, because this card represents accidental things that screw with your life. And the morale here, like the life advice in this card is, sometimes it is not your fault. Sometimes it has nothing to do with anything that you have done or haven't done. Sometimes bad things just happen. And this is a very powerful thing to remember, because oftentimes we want to feel like we're in control of our lives so much that we convince ourselves that anything bad that happens must be our fault. And this creates a cycle of guilt and shame and fear and anxiety that is not necessary in your life, because sometimes things are just out of your control. Things are out of your hand. Sometimes accidents happen. And that's what this card brings you, that realization. Even if you do everything right, even if you put all of your love, all of your care, if you do everything responsibly, even then, sometimes life will just throw you a curve and it is not your fault. And then we have the Star. And we see a naked woman surrounded by stars, pouring water into a lake and pouring water into the ground, into both. And this is a card of renewal. This card is usually interpreted as a card of renewal, like respite after a difficult situation. If the Star is what comes after. Like after you have done all this hard work, after you have been hit with, bad luck, and you have worked your way out of it and you have grown. After all of this is over, when things start to look up for you, that's the Star. And the advice that the Star says is, when you have a lot, when you have plenty, don't hoard it. Just pour everything you got, both into the ground, like into the sensible world, into the world of the practical, and into water, into your own spiritual side, into your emotions, your relationships, your intuition. That's basically what the card says. Like when things are looking up for you, don't turn it into a moment for hoarding. Make sure that you water the plants, you water the soil, you water the water, you water the lake. Make sure that you're partaking into that abundance mindset. Now we see the moon. Here in the moon, we see a path that goes through these two towers, and the path goes from the water into the space in between the towers. And we can see that there are two dogs holding at the moon. But what you don't maybe realize is one of them is a dog, but the other one on the other side is not a dog. This is a wolf. This is a savage, wild wolf, and the domesticated, the pet, the dog. And these two represent your own self. It represents the part of you, the persona, the part of you that you have crafted to the domesticated side of you, the side of you that is good, well-behaved, and wants to get along with society's rules, and the other side of you, the wild, untamed, beastly side of you that has very different ideas and very different goals than the other one. And the moon is asking you to recognize that they both exist within you. You're both the dog and the wolf, and you're going to need to pay attention to both of them if you want to walk the right path. So don't forget to listen to the wild, untamed side of you, because it also needs to walk alongside you in this life of yours. Sometimes we're tempted or we're pushed to conform, to take the parts of us that are difficult to swallow by the rest of society, and we're asked to file them down, to push them and hide them in a corner, never to be seen again. And sometimes this process is done so well that you end up losing contact with it altogether. It's not that you're just hiding them from the people, from society. You end up even hiding it from your own self. So the moon is asking you to keep in mind that this part of you exists and that it's in there somewhere and that you need to work with it if you want to get anywhere. The sun, the joyful, energy-giving, generous side. It's represented here by the sun. And if you take a closer look at this, what we have here is a hero riding a white horse with a red piece of cloth, just like Napoleon. But it's not a hero. In place of a hero, we have a little child. It's a child. It's a naked child, almost a baby. And that is because the most generous, energy-giving side of you is childlike. This represents the core of your being that never stops being playful and wondering about life because it is eternally, it is a child, an eternal child, a divine child. And this is the side of you that is playful and generous and radiating energy outwards. So what the sun is asking of you is to become joyful and playful like a child. And this is when you will find the most radiance in your life. Never forget that this child lives inside of you. Sometimes we are so full of responsibilities and duties and things that we completely neglect to have fun, to enjoy, to let that child inside of you delight with your life. And that card is a reminder that that too is very important. That too must be taken seriously. Then we have judgment. And in judgment, we see an angel playing a trumpet and some people rising from the dead. You see the boxes they're rising from? Those are caskets. And they are rising and extending their arms and looking up at the sky because, they are being resurrected. But the color of their skin, you can see it's gray. They're not gray because they are undead. That's not why they are gray. They're gray because in tarot, the color gray represents wisdom. It's the result of blending black and white. It's the result of going through temperance. So what this card basically is telling you is the most important thing after you do all of the things, you go through your entire path, is to make sure that you have done everything in accordance to your own wisdom, to your own sense of right and wrong. You won't have to look back and feel shame or feel guilt. You will look back and feel good about the choices that you've made. And this in itself is a type of resurrection. And then we have the world, and this is the last card of the Major Arcana in tarot. And we can see that there is a woman. It's not really a woman. The esoteric read of this card is that it's actually a hermaphrodite. That's why she has a veil. That's why you can't see the genitals. It's because she has a dong. But this is more of an esoteric read, okay? Let's stick to the life advice. So this is the world. And you see how, you see the name of the card, the name of this card is the world because it is the end result. It is the fruit of all of your work. So you have gone through the entire deck. You went through the whole path. And at the end, you have a product of all your effort, which is, well, integration. You have grown as a person. And this is called the world because, you know, it is said that God created the world in 6 days, and the seventh day he rested. Well, this is the same idea. This is the card that represents that your job has been completed. And what this card, the advice that this card gives you is learn to recognize when your work is done. It's not always easy. Sometimes we're fixated on working and we want to continue to work and improve and refine. But there comes a point where all of that working and refinement starts to become a problem, starts to erode your own work. Say, for example, that you were writing a novel. And you wrote your novel and you put it all in writing, and then at the end of it you start editing the novel, and you start editing but you don't know when to stop. So it becomes the world, it's complete, the job is done, work is complete, but you just can't stop. You can't stop editing and proofreading and editing again, and you end up damaging what you had. There's a point of diminishing returns. And then if you continue, there's a point where you start to destroy what was good. So this card is learn to identify when the job is done, and learn to rest after. You know, God created the world in 6 days, and then he saw that the world was good, and then he rested. And this is what the card wants you to do in your life, with your projects, with your affairs. Learn to recognize when something is done, and then recognize how good it is, and then rest. And those are the 21 pieces of advice from the tarot. And I'll see you soon. Oh, let me know in the comments if you like this and you would like me to do a more esoteric reading, like a deeper reading of the tarot regarding like reality and God and metaphysics. Let me know in the comments, okay? Bye.